As you can see and hear, I'm on my back patio this morning, on the morning of May 18th, and I just wanted to come from another different setting. It's a beautiful day here. The temperature is nice. Over the weekend, in a very short period, less than 36 hours, we had about 12.5 centimeters of rain, 5 inches of rain. So things are very green and warming up a little bit today. So anyway, I just wanted to share a piece of that out here with you. It's a great place to be right now. I also wanted to take you today to Exodus chapter 11. And we're not going to go through it in detail, but there's two episodes that take place between God's people in the wilderness. You see, what the wilderness was about, that are in this one chapter, but what the wilderness is about God introducing and orienting his people to their new normal. Their old normal was Egypt. When they came out of Egypt, they encountered a new normal. It wasn't like Egypt, and it wasn't like anything they had known or grown up with. God began to take them into a new normal, and this new normal, as we've seen already, brought them into encounter with things that they understood from the old way, but not from the new way. One was when they encountered the poisoned water, the lake or body of water that was bitter, and God showed them that he could take bitter water and make it drinkable. There was also the occasion in which they needed water, but there was no water, and God had Moses strike the rock, and water came forth. There was the occasion about manna, where they had no food, but all of a sudden God gave them a mysterious food they had never seen before, and a food that was there in totally abundant supply, as much as they needed for their family. No more, no less. Every day, just as God told them it would be, and all they had to do was gather it and prepare it as he told them how. They had to learn how to do that. They had problems learning how to do that because they already thought they understood how it should be done. And God's really clear as he takes us into our new normal that it's important that we learn from him how he wants us to live in these times. Otherwise, all we'll do is live by the constraints that the pandemic and those in control of the world system have, the constraints they put on us. Believe me, we are not under the constraints of the coronavirus. We're not under the constraints of governments, though we want to respond to governments. But there's always a time where we're listening to God first, so that God's able to walk us through these times and to show us how to live. Because these are not times, these are times that have God has designed to turn our attention to him so that we can learn from him. However, if we don't learn from him, if we do what a lot of people are trying to do, which is return to the old normal, then we run the risk of running not only counter to him, but running into the arms of the world system. And when that happens, the only outcomes that can happen are that it will steal, kill, and destroy who we are and what we have, both us and our future generations. So it's a real exceptional time that we're in to learn from him. As I mentioned, Israel had already, as we've seen, had already learned about water. They had already learned about manna. They had also learned about meat. Well, after they leave Sinai, or in the time after God had revealed to them things about the tabernacle and things about his commands and so forth, and given them the commands on stone, and put them in order, he began to send them further through the wilderness. In Numbers chapter 11 is a chapter I want you to look at over the next couple of days, because it describes their encounter again with manna and with meat. These are very basic things in the U.S. right now. With the coronavirus, some of the places that have been struck the worst with coronavirus have been the meat packing plants, the plants that prepare, that slaughter beef or pork and chicken, and then prepare it for people to consume. But the coronavirus has been so active there now that there is a very real possibility that there could be meat shortages here. At the same time, meat is being consumed more than ever around the globe. And in fact, much of what is considered uh, global warming, greenhouse gases and so forth, could be attributed to the increase of livestock around the world because of our desire for meat and so forth like this. And the thing is, this is not about meat, but this is about it just showing that these same issues, core issues of food safety and security and are always around. And our God is one who is fully prepared to address each and every need. But what God asks of us, what he has covenanted with us, is that if we will listen to him and learn from him, he'll take care of these things. He may not take care of them in advance so that we know we have a 5-month supply. But he'll do it so we know we have what we need for the day. And many times much further than that. Okay, God is a God who is prepared to walk us through these things and to show us how he has designed the earth to operate so we can operate in it as he has created it. In Numbers chapter 11, they have a problem with manna, and they have a problem with meat. And the problem is they just grow tired of it. They're not they're complaining about it. And the reason why they're complaining about it is because they remember what their old was like. Now, I don't know about you, I understand that. Okay. The interesting thing about memory and about remembering things of the past is this: we always tend to remember them better or worse than they really were. That's just a fact of how memory works. And oftentimes we'll long for something that at the time we were in it, it really wasn't that good. But because we've come into a new time and we're unsure of what our provision is, we think that would have been better. And so we look backwards. The problem with when you're trying to move forward, the problem with looking backwards is if you're trying to move forward, but you're looking backwards, you'll always run into a wall. And that's what happens here in Numbers chapter 11. They start looking back and remembering how things were instead of looking to the Lord for what he wanted to do today. Now, again, I've mentioned this before, but we oftentimes run the risk of either looking back or looking too far in the future. And but God's provision is always for today, whether it's in terms of our physical needs, our emotional needs, our relational needs, all of these things. You see, even now in the midst of this pandemic, and for those of you who are still in some level of personal or family isolation, you know, people are saying, "Oh, I can't take this anymore," and yet here's the very reality is that the Lord has a way for each of us to move through these kinds of times and have exceptional results and effects in our lives. It just requires that we learn from him and receive from him. Now, in both of these passages, the people complain to God. Now, at this point, they've already come through a learning curve in which they know what God has done. They know how much great a miracle this is. See, I find it interesting that oftentimes we clamor for God to do miracles and to unlock miracles and there to be miracles, miracles, miracles. When the very miracle he's doing in our midst, we begin to despise because it's not what we wanted. It's not what we expected. See, that's the thing about miracles. Miracles are simply God's way of working where you can't attribute it to anyone else but God. And God's doing things right now that you can attribute only to him. Those are miracles. And yet we just like with Israel in Numbers 11 with the manna, we can grow to despise it and wish for some other kind of miracle or some other kind of response. Let me encourage you today to just ask the Lord about the things that you despise, about the things that you like. Dialogue with him. That's what I did this morning. Instead of coming in and turning on the news like I normally do in the morning, I just sat and I just interacted with the Lord over what I was experiencing, what I was seeing, what I was feeling. And I wanted to, and when I did that, I asked him how he was seeing it, what he was feeling about it, so that I could have the Lord to know how to regulate what I'm experiencing and feeling, so that I can feel what he's feeling and think what he's thinking. It changes you. It changed me. I woke up this morning. There were some things I was uneasy about, things that I wasn't sure about. I was worried, maybe. I'm not sure worried's the right word. It was that sense that I didn't know some things to do next. I couldn't see very far in my future just today. And as I dialogued with the Lord, and as the Lord spoke to me in the midst of that, as I interacted with him, he let me know where things stand in terms of him. I learned a long time ago that if things are good with God, they're good with me. If God says this is what I like, this is what I deem as good, then it's good for me. And so oftentimes I find I have to change the way I think. Instead of always asking God to do what I think is right for me, I learn to interact with him so I know what he says is good. And I'm willing to receive that. And I hope you're willing to receive that. Israel struggled with it in Numbers chapter 11. And it's not wrong to struggle, and God never despises them. Although you'll see in these passages that God does have a reaction to the people. And there is a point at which God's patience begins to run thin with us. For many of us who have been believers for a long time, I'm 63 years old. Next year, I'll have been a believer for 50 years. And, when you think about being a believer for 50 years, there's certain things I should know about my relationship with God that if I haven't experienced those yet, something's wrong. And you need to do that even from time to time with your own relationship with God. Not just accept things as they are, but say, Lord, am I where you want me to be? Am I at the level that you say I should be at? You'd be surprised how many times he'll say yes. And you'll be surprised as well at the times that you think you've done what you're supposed to. And the Lord says, that's not really what I'm doing. So it's an important, these situations of learning our new normal give us a way to learn how to interact with God and gain his way, what he's doing with these things, so that we're in moving in step with him. Now, the other thing that caught my attention in here is just how awesome God is, how he takes care of big things and how he takes care of little things. You might remember, or you'll read in the main part of the chapter, when God brings quail in to feed the people. Remember, there's 3 million people. And when God told Moses to tell the people that he was going to send in quail to feed them all, Moses was like, really? There's not enough fish in the sea. There's not enough birds in the sky, so to speak. Not enough animals in our herds to feed all these people. You're going to feed all these people? And God reassured him that he would. When God sent in the quail, here's what it says in the scripture. It says that God sent in the quail, so many quail, that the quail were on the ground 1 meter high, 30 miles from east to west, 30 miles from north to south. So what is that? 40K from or so from right to left and north to south, so to speak. If you take all of that area, I just sat down with a calculator and figured out the amount of quail this was, and how many square meters this was. This was like 7 billion square meters, cubic meters, if you will, of quail. God brought in a moment. Where did he get all those quail? I don't know. But the fact of the matter is, when God says he's going to do something, he pulls out all the stops. He's able to do everything he said he will do, and abundantly. God wanted the people to understand this so much that he gave them so much that they had more than enough food for 3 million people, quail, full every day for 30 days. Now that's a pretty good supply. And in fact, they ate it so much, by the end of it, they didn't want quail anymore. He says it was literally coming out their noses. See, God doesn't want to take us to that point, but if we're not gonna learn how to move with him now, then as time goes on, God's patience grows thin. Our God is a God who loves us. He wants us to come into covenant, not so that we're full in the way that he filled them to show them, but to be full in the way where every day we're fully, not just full of what we need to eat or drink, but we're fully satisfied with what God is doing in us. That's what he wants to do in us. That's what the new normal is about. It's about being satisfied fully in every dimension. But to do that, we're going to have to learn from the Lord himself. He's walking us through this step by step. This is a time for us to take steps day by day. And I encourage you to do that, as I know you are. I'm starting to get some emails and things from different ones of you describing things that the Lord's had you do. And those things are wonderful. They're different. Each one is different. Some are very personal. Some are full of worship. I've received just several in the last few hours. And so anyway, I'll share more of those with you in the future. But know that God is doing this to fill you up. This is just the beginning of our new normal. And our new normal isn't just the old normal modified. Our new normal is God's new, where he makes all things new. That's what we're about in this time, as we step into his kingdom and the promise and the rest that he has designed for us.